Let's now talk live to Sam Lewis, freelance journalist and political commentator. Evening to you, Sam.
Evening both. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. So has Boris Johnson lost the plot?
Well, I think that for the last day, everyone in the media has been showing these two particular clips. You know, you're no different. And I think that give the guy a break. Did you watch the whole 20-minute clip, Cristo?
I didn't watch the whole 20 minutes, no, but that's because I genuinely don't like to watch much of him talking at all, because I don't believe a word that comes out of his mouth, so I find it a pointless waste of my time.
Well, look, if you watched it for the first 15 minutes, then you'll notice that he actually sped through it, and he made some very good points about how we should ultimately look at the opportunities at the upcoming industrial revolution, or with green energy, and the moral missioning of levelling up. And I just thought that he made some very good points. But yeah, he got to a part of the speech where he lost his page, and that's more about, you know, having the organization and a minder behind him, putting the speech in the right order. I'm sure he gave an earful to him after the speech. And later on, when he's talking about Peppa Pig, he has this sort of odd ability to bring in these very specific and random examples. Look, a few years ago, before the Brexit referendum, he talked about selling cake to the French. When he talked about the Australian trade deal, he talked about Tim Tams and boomerangs. You know, he has this way of endearing himself to people that average people just know about and want to listen to. And like Peppa Pig is one of those. Everyone knows about Peppa Pig, and it makes some people laugh.
But is it prime ministerial, and does it give confidence, bearing in mind that his own MPs have written letters of no confidence this evening, bearing in mind that he only got through his distinctly unconservative social care bill last night by just over 20 votes, I think it was. Is it very prime ministerial, and should he be worried by this slight rebellion?
Look, I do think if this had happened about 3 months ago when things were on the high and they were high in the polls, you know, it would have been laughed off as another Boris moment. But the fact is that for the last 3 weeks, he's been up against the hill. You know, recent headlines, the tax rises, the sight of thousands of migrants storming ashore, rebellions from the backbenchers that you just mentioned on social care, and ultimately last week, the disappointing announcement that HS2 won't get to Leeds. You know, yeah, this has not been good, and it's not been a good 3 weeks for him. Now, whether it was prime ministerial, I leave that to your viewers to make up in their own minds. But I do think that he simply lost his page, and that's why it didn't look prime ministerial. But that is a separate issue. He does have to get on top of his backbenchers, though, and he does have to try and actually talk to them, and he has to change what's going on in government and how it's structured and the management that he has in place, because the chief whip at the moment doesn't seem to be doing much. And it seems that these backbenchers actually need a bit of coddling, need a bit of love, need to be shown that they actually do matter.
Perhaps they need a few conservative policies to get their teeth into, because certainly Boris Johnson, who, as we know, stands for absolutely nothing. I mean, the problem is when you get to power, when you look at leaders like Thatcher, when you even look at leaders, I mean, heaven forbid we wouldn't to have got him as Prime Minister, but someone even like Corbyn, even, dare I say, Blair, you might not have liked what they had to say. You might not have agreed with what they had to say, but ye gods, you believe they believed it. And when
not
you
really.
have,
I think you thought they were lying sometimes, didn't you?
Well, are you telling me that Margaret Thatcher didn't have an ideological framework?
Thatcher did, but some of the others, Blair and Corbyn.
Like Corbyn is a socialist, and at least if anything that he would have done would have come from the framework of those values, whereas Boris has got to power, whether that be any kind of political position he's ever got in, by just simply nodding and agreeing with the person in front of him without having any kind of ideological set of values whatsoever. This great neoliberal that we were sold we were going to be getting is more socialist than Corbyn. And isn't that the real problem with him, is that he has no conservative values to actually offer a conservative backbench and a conservative electorate?
I mean, I think we need to take this thing. I'm not here to say he's the best prime minister we've ever had, but
no,
the fact is that his mission...
He should have some conservative values, shouldn't he, if he's a conservative prime minister?
I think, Christo, the point is that, you know, we're still in a pandemic. You know, this is during World War II. Do you think people were having a go at Churchill for spending too much money on defence and spending too much money? Because that's a very socialist thing.
He wasn't a good speaker either, Churchill. He wasn't a very good speaker.
Look, we're in the middle of an international crisis. I think we can cut him some slack when it comes to, upping the public debt. You know, we can't yet hold back. The pandemic isn't over. The pandemic isn't over, and here we are talking about we should cut all the debt. I think,
but he also had his socialist reaction to the pandemic, making the government have more power, locking people down, is decidedly big state socialism. Raising the tax burden, big state socialism. What he could be doing, if he had an ideological framework that was remotely conservative to be working from, is saying, you know what, we do need money in the economy. We do need money for the NHS. We are going to lower taxes and we're going to stimulate business to the point where people are spending money out in the economy and we're getting bigger VAT receipts. We are stimulating the economy by having more people being able to keep their own money, where they are motivated to be more productive because they're keeping more of their pounds in their pocket. That is a conservative way of stimulating the economy and raising money. He has become a high tax, high spend, 1970s Labour politician with the highest tax burden since the Second World War. Now, how can we possibly take seriously a man who was supposed to have these neoliberal values and that underneath this buffoon was a hard-nosed Tory when he's decidedly un-Tory in policy?
But this is where I think that his initial reaction to the pandemic of giving 80%, carrying on 80% of wages, the COVID relief that he gave to a lot of average people. Look, people in their 20s, people like me who relied on the furlough scheme to sort of survive. Where would we be? We'd be on the dole. We'd be if we didn't have any support. And, you know, it was praised by most of Europe and they followed suit. And I think that, as I say, this is a pandemic. And you say, since World War II, we have the highest tax burden. Well, there was World War II beforehand, and there's a reason that we needed to raise taxes.
What's that got to do with the social care budget now? What's that got to do with him lying over social care? What's that got to do with taking people's houses in order to pay for elderly care? That's nothing to do with the pandemic. That's him eyeing people's assets in a decidedly Labour way.
This is where I think, this is where he's done something that's a bit, he has broken a promise in the manifesto. And I'm not saying that everything that he's done is absolutely perfect, but you can say, and I think that this is right, as Jeremy Hunt pointed out, this is better than the previous system where there was absolutely no support at all. And there was no roof, there was no cap, but now there is a cap of £86,000. Now, the details can be changed by any future government. So if there is a future government or the next parliament after the next election, Boris can go back on that and start again. It can be changed.
So we're now relying on Boris's dishonesty in order to get us out of his dishonesty. Is that where we are now?
Are you suggesting that this isn't better than the previous system?
I'm suggesting that it's not a conservative way of solving these sorts of problems. And if we end up with a different government in 2 or 3 years' time, a Labour government, well, then do you honestly think that they're going to undo this? At the moment, we have a Labour government that are saying that the Conservative government aren't Labour enough, they're not going far enough. And we have a Conservative government that is taking the middle ground and taking decidedly left-wing policies. There is no alternative for anyone to vote for. If you are a voter and you say, you know what, I don't like that idea of that social care policy, I don't like the idea of the house that is a decidedly conservative value that I have purchased because I want to have my own home.
Yeah, but you don't lose the whole house now, do you? You only lose it up to £80,000. You keep your £2 million house.
And if you live in a £2 million
that's
house,
very Tory,
though, how is that levelling up the north?
Well, it's not, but that's very Tory, though, isn't it?
What to
not levelling up the north?
So he's either lying about levelling up the north.
You can't say that's Labour. That's sort of socialist policy.
It is, because we are living in a southeast bubble, but people who don't own houses that are extremely expensive. If you own a house that's £200,000, well, that's nearly half of the value of your house will be taken by the state for the social care you've already paid for with, by the way, a higher national insurance contribution.
That is his red wall, isn't it?
That is not conservative. What do you say to that?
Well, I do ultimately think that he has spent the last 2 years in this sort of bubble and he's not been on the streets as much. And as a result, he's got these less conservative values for sure. But the fact is that his primary aim is to restore Britain's confidence in itself and to battle the defeatism that defined the Britain of, well, up until very recently, I think. And I think that the Conservative policies will follow, but they will follow in time. And I do think that, as I say, I'm going to keep going to this pandemic point because we are in a crisis. And I think that we were in a crisis.
Okay, we'll come back to you. We're just going to do a quick break, but we will come back to you because I want to pick up on that point. And let's see what other people have got to say about this as well, right here on Talk Radio. So still joined live on the line by Sam Lewis, freelance journalist, political commentator, and slightly more sympathetic towards Boris Johnson, I think it's fair to say. You say, Sam, look, the Conservative values, the Conservative policies are going to come. When? I mean, they've got an 80-seat majority. I would think that would be a perfect time to bring in the Conservative policies that most of the country voted for. And I'll take what you said. I mean, those things about the pandemic and about putting people on furlough, decidedly unconservative, completely understand that. In times of crisis, you have a big state. But when the crisis is over, you don't keep the big state, or worse, tax people more and take their wealth in order to fund that big state.
Look, frankly, this should be the turning point, I think, and this should be where he realized, because he only won the vote yesterday on the social care bill by 26 votes. There were lots of people who didn't vote for it and a few that abstained, and he should see this as the opportunity to make amends, to make sure the chief whip gets the backbenchers on side and gets their ideas about policy. Because, look, I think you're right. He doesn't have a completely conservative guiding light. He does simply do what he thinks will be popular and that will get improvement in the polls, because it's the polls that win elections that can allow a conservative government to run and then pass conservative policies. And I think that at the moment, he knows that he's on course to, well, at the moment, as of a few months ago, he was going to be on course to win the next election. But as the Tories did 3 times in the 1980s and the 1990s, they can fight back from behind to bring back a conservative government again next time around.
But do you think that they can do that? I mean, I am a traditional conservative, as you probably guessed. I'm a small state conservative. I'm a real Thatcher fan. I will no way in the world vote for someone who I consider to be a pathological liar like Boris Johnson.
So you'd vote for Keir Starmer? I mean, who would
no,
you vote
I wouldn't
for?
vote
just
for
wouldn't
Keir
vote.
Starmer.
Yeah, who's
I'm
the
not sure.
alternative, Chris?
I'm sorry, the who's the alternative argument in order to make Boris
that's how he
Prime
got it in the
Minister.
first place, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
and for how long can we keep using the argument, well, at least it's not Jeremy Corbyn? Unfortunately, there is no one I would vote for at the moment because there is no opposition. But I certainly wouldn't give my vote to a man who, almost in a pathological sense, lies so easily, so brazenly, and with so little remorse over so much for so long. And I think that it's coming home to roost among the electorate. I think it's coming home to roost among Conservative backbenchers.
Yeah, look, it certainly is to an extent. And this is why I think there should be a turning point soon. And Boris Johnson shouldn't think that he's suddenly going to have their support for forever. And that's certainly not the case. But I think that this idea that there's somebody else, this is the way our political system works. Like, you vote basically for one or two parties. That's how it works. And he knows that. And he is going to be able probably to win the election because he knows how the political system works. You can say you want about, oh, I'll probably vote for somebody else, or I definitely won't vote for him for this, and this reason. But until there's an actual proper alternative, and I don't think Keir Starmer is the alternative, he's not going to be a strong alternative. Because look, if you go on the streets of where I live in Worcestershire, people don't know who Keir Starmer is. They don't care for him. They don't care for his policies. But they know who Boris is. They know him as the man on television who they see as an optimist, and they want to vote for him. Now, if we're talking about specific conservative policies and values, the average person probably won't know that much about him, but they see him and they see him as an optimist, and that's why they'll vote for him. And that's how he'll stay.
But the threat is on the inside, isn't it? It's Rishi Sunak is the real threat. And, the Tories always... It's infighting that got rid of Thatcher. She was still doing all right with the public. So
absolutely,
it's infighting
I agree
that
with
affects the Tories. So Rishi is his biggest enemy, isn't he?
And I mean, well, people are saying that Rishi is, he's the tax and spend as well now. But I disagree with that. He's very talented, and I think he is coming through, and he has a lot of support of the Tory base.
I just want someone who is an adult in the room, and someone who look, I get that there is a part of politics which is about bending the truth and being a bit dishonest. But I genuinely, I mean, I don't know. Do you think that Boris is a pathological liar, Sam?
I don't think he's a pathological liar, but I think he has exaggerated the truth, and he's not. I'm not here to speak about his moral character. I'm here to speak about his politics and how he goes about it. But I don't think that he simply, lives off lying.
Lied about Turkey joining the EU.
So far.
Lied about stating that he never stated Turkey were joining the EU, lied about the number of children living in poverty, lied about the Heathrow third runway, and went away when the vote was taking place. He said he would lie, ironically, in front of the bulldozers when he actually just went away when the vote was taking place. Lied about proroguing Parliament, lied to the Queen, lied about the reduction of CO2 emissions under a Tory government, lied about child poverty to Parliament, lied about the NHS funding increase to Parliament, lied about not being aware about the Marcus Rashford school dinner row, lied about NHS surcharge, remember the U-turn over that one, lied continually about the dates that we'd come out of lockdown, lied about the vaccine passport that he said that we wouldn't be getting, lied about the functioning test and trace app, which never ended up coming back, lied about the number of primary schools that were open after lockdown, lied about the number of tests being returned for COVID when there was a national scandal, lied about the Jennifer R. Curie affair, lied about the national insurance increase in the manifesto, lied about the social care and not taking any money from your house.
Yeah, but apart from that,
he's quite.
I think they all lie, don't they? I mean,
I know, but I mean, come on, that's
very
quite
long
the
list. That is quite the list, and I'm not here to take that point by.
At least he's consistent.
But it is almost pathological, right? It is.
Well, look, Tony Blair and David Cameron were polished and formidable politicians. Gordon Brown and Theresa May were rigid, fearful, and cautious. Johnson, he's something else, and yet, look, he's Prime Minister. He's made it to the top. As I say, he's an optimist.
Do you not feel a bit, when I've just given you that list, do you not feel a bit uncomfortable now defending someone who has that track record of honesty?
Hang on, I'm here to defend his sort of political nous and his ability.
Well, what are you here to defend? You're not here to defend his moral character. You're not here to defend his political nous. You're not here to defend his policy.
But people have a very low view of politicians, so I don't think it matters that he lies because everyone.
Exactly.
What are you here to defend, Sam? Tell me.
Well, look, people see that most politicians are like this anyway, and they consider them pathological liars. So it's not healthy, certainly not. But I don't think we can go about calling Boris alone in that field the solitary figure.
Well, that doesn't fill me with confidence. All right, well, some of the others lie as well. Great. Well, that's all right then. All right. Well, Sam, I don't know if you've given me much more faith and whether that X will be going into the blue box for me, but I do appreciate the time you've given us. That's Sam Lewis, freelance journalist, political commentator,